thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now podcast, where we help career and entrepreneurial women gain the tools to develop a success mindset, create winning strategies, build collaborative relationships, and take bold action towards creating impact and fulfillment in their lives and careers. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I'm on a mission to awaken and activate women and emerging leaders so they can tap into their innate leadership ability, elevate their influence, and create the impact they were destined to make. If you're ready to uplevel your confidence, courage, and influence, you've come to the right place. Join me weekly for insights, strategies, and resources to help you grow, develop, and embody the leader you were meant to be, so that you can make the impact you know you are called to make and establish the legacy you've always dreamed. The world eagerly awaits the emergence of your brilliance, impact, and influence. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode. Welcome to another episode of She Leads Now. I am your host, Sabine Gideon, and we are on episode 25, I believe, as I am always, and every week, excited to bring this episode to you. And so last week, if you haven't been able to listen to the episode yet, I would encourage you to go back and listen to it. We discussed at a high level, some of the things that you need to start considering as you're making that shift from solopreneur to CEO, or as you're starting to think about, what might that actually look like in real time and in action? What are some of those components? This week, we're going to take a little deeper dive where we talk about, longer term success in your business. What does that mean for you as the CEO? What is required? Who is required in terms of who do you need to become in order to support that? And how do you build around you the support that you need to be able to do that? And so when it comes to the long-term success of your business, there isn't necessarily a lot of support to help you lay the right foundation. While there are a slew of business coaches and consultants out there who, have techniques and strategies and tools and resources that have worked for them or have worked for other clients, there's no such thing as this one-stop shop and quote unquote, the only way or the one way to be able to lay that foundation for your business. A lot of that, truth be told, comes through trial and error. And a lot of that, it will be birthed out of you bringing forth this vision that you have about your business. You're the leader, right? You're the leader in the organization. You're the visionary. You're also the one doing all of the inspiring. And so unlike when we're in a job or when we're, working for someone else, there's really no one else to look to in order to make decisions and call the shots. Like that's all on you. And while that may be exciting for some of us, especially for those of us who, got to the place where we didn't really want to have to take orders from other people, that can be invigorating. But at the same time, truth be told, it can also feel exhausting because you're constantly in this place of evaluating, making decisions, making sure that you're making the right decision, not just for in the moment, but in the future, that your decisions, they're done from a place of caring, from a place of compassion. And so, decision fatigue is a real thing that leaders may find themselves facing. So again, while you can always draw on the experiences of others, whether that be business coaches, other CEOs. At the end of the day, when it comes to your business, it's going to come down to you, how you want to run your business, your employees, the people that you bring on. Basically, it's all in your hands, right? No pressure at all. I know out of experience that can be intimidating. And as a woman, as type A, as whatever you want to label here, at the end of the day, we don't want to mess it up. We don't want to mess it up because one, we take pride in the work that we put out there into the world and the services that we're able to provide to people. And we take pride in our ability to support others in building their dreams or in, building their businesses or whatever capacity we're supporting other individuals in. So it is a big deal. And it is something that, we ought to allocate the appropriate amount of time to really think through. Obviously, once you've stabilized as an organization, I do believe that thinking through longer term is something that as a leader and as a business owner should be at the forefront of your mind always, regardless of, what the economy is doing, regardless of what your business capacity and your business load is. Making that time and creating that space to be a visionary, to, hold the line, if you will, in terms of where you're moving, is critical and super important. So, with that, as the leader and as the CEO of your business, as you're looking to create long term sustainable success, it's important, like I said before, that you just not focus on the day to day success of your team or of the organization, but really the longevity of your business. What does that look like? Who are you? Who is your team? What is your positioning in the market? Last week I talked about, what is the legacy that you want to leave? To give you an example of what this looks like in real life, as I mentioned to you in last week's episode, I found myself at a place last year, towards the end of last year, where I was completely in the weeds and didn't even have the capacity, because I was so burnt out and overwhelmed in the day to day that I was focused on, that I didn't have the capacity to look long term. And I talked to you about how, dangerous and how vulnerable, or how much of a vulnerable place that I allowed myself to be, and of course the business and those who support me in the business. And so, outside of really taking a step back to one, deal or understand what decisions and what behaviors led to that, and of course, putting systems in place and teams and all that other stuff. One of the other major things that I had to figure out is really who I wanted to be. As I've developed, certainly the business has transformed, and the vision has even expanded, greater than what I thought was a great thing when I was first leaving corporate America several years ago. But part of this whole process and this whole transition of solopreneur to CEO, not only required me to look internally, as in myself, first and foremost, of course, look internally at the organization and the businesses and the processes, but it also challenged me to really decide, who did I want to be in the marketplace. And so what that meant was, prior to Q4 of last year, when I would introduce myself, or even the way that I thought about myself in the business, I saw myself as the coach, right? So my title, if you will, was always, CEO and founder on LinkedIn. But in reality, if I went to an event, or if I was, virtually networking, I would introduce myself as an executive coach. And something shifted during that entire process of me reevaluating where I was, what was working, what was not working. I realized that part of my shift in terms of growing the business, and part of my shift in terms of really building out this organization that, I could see only in my head, was me shifting not just in title to CEO, but in identity to CEO. And so that required me to stop referring to myself as a coach. And if you've been around, or if you've noticed, I've shifted my introduction to everything that I do, especially online, to, CEO and founder of Gideon Enterprises. That may seem like one small step, but in actuality, I had to first align with who, I was becoming, if you will. And yes, it is just a title, right? It can be seen as just a title, but it was also an identity shift that allowed me to then step into that from a title perspective. As I've shared with you many times over, leadership is not about a title. Leadership is not a role. Leadership is essentially and to the core of who we are as human beings. But I do think that there are varying levels of leadership. And as we grow, as we develop, and as we put in the work to actually grow and develop, we find ourselves taking on those different levels, or those different identities that require leadership. So first and foremost was me deciding how I wanted to show up in the business, and then me deciding how I wanted to identify myself as the leader within the business. And one of the other things that came forth for me that was actually powerful was the decision around what it is that I wanted to do and wanted to focus on in the business versus what I no longer wanted to. The parts, the things that I did and the things that I identified with that were no longer serving me and were no longer going to serve the growth of the business. And in fact, funny enough, I had a conversation with someone recently and they asked me a question that really pinpointed the very thing that I had asked myself, maybe not so eloquently, back in Q4 of last year. And the question that she asked was, really, what is it that I want to hand off, right? So if I am stepping into this place of or this role of CEO in my business, what parts of my role or what parts of my activity, my day-to-day activity did I want to hand off? And so that's when it clicked for me because this was part of my process of last year. And it's something that I had recognized before, but I think, sometimes we get into these situations where we got to learn the same lesson a few times before it finally clicks. But I recall I was supporting a client at one point, and the work that I was doing, was strategic at a very high level, but it was also very executional and, down to the administrative stuff. And I remember saying to myself or coming to the realization that I'm great at strategy. I'm great at big picture thinking and looking long term and, determining all of the components to get to whatever that thing is, that vision is. I'm also good at execution, right? Where I could take big tasks, break them down into manageable chunks and timelines and timeframes to get stuff done. What I'm not good at, however, operating in the space of strategy as well as the place of execution at the same time. And I remember part of what made that role challenging to me was very little space to switch back and forth, where it wasn't like, oh, I can spend on a week on being strategic and getting, the vision and getting all that stuff out and then shift over to execution. It was as soon as I thought it, I had to figure out how to do it, which was great training in many ways and very helpful to my development. But long term, that's not me operating in my zone of genius. And that it stopped serving me and it stopped serving the client. So, with that, fast forward to everything that I went through at the end of last year and even having this conversation, it just all came together where I had to realize and be honest with myself and give myself permission to say, you know what, as I'm building this business and as I'm looking at the longer term strategy for this business, the longer term sustainable success, I cannot, like literally, I cannot function as the strategist and the executioner in any capacity, or for lack of a better term, I don't want to anymore. So as I've not only just transitioned into the role of CEO and the identity of CEO, I've also transitioned my responsibility in where I'm going to hold the line in how I support individuals best, which has also created space for me to determine, okay, if I am going to be the strategist or if that is my primary focus and my primary approach, what are the gaps in the organization and who do I have in my network or who can I develop to be able to fill those gaps outside of, administrative tasks or back office operational tasks, which I feel like I've done a good job filling those. That has been, super helpful. But now that I'm transitioning to this more narrow focus in my organization, how do I now build up the team of specialists who can support me in actually getting the work done for clients moving forward? So hopefully that gives you some insight and a little bit more clarity in terms of what I mean by, creating longer term success, especially now that you've stepped into the CEO role. It's not just letting go of the day to day, and it's not just, putting the systems and the processes in place. It's also identifying, okay, where is your wheelhouse and where is your wheelhouse going to be? And how do you staff up and position your organization to have other specialists to support you in that capacity? So with that, I just want to share also, 5 key steps that you need to set your business up for success for long term. So I gave you high level overview of my process and what it is that I went through. And so we'll talk about these 5 really quickly. First and foremost, right? Define and have a clear vision for your business. You're probably going to get sick and tired of hearing me say this, especially if you're in a consulting capacity and even in a coaching capacity. I know that it is so much easier to be able to look at someone else's problem or look at someone else's challenge or their mountain and have the answer, right? Like that. That clarity and that vision that we have is so easy when it comes to other people's things. But when it comes to us, sometimes and many times we have blind spots that we simply can't see past, which is why it's so important that we are creating the space and making the time and being diligent about figuring out or resetting whatever the vision is. So that's when you go back to your why. What is your ultimate objective for your business? Why does your business exist? Once you know that, make sure that every step you take is always going to bring you 1 foot closer to your greater why, or your North Star, whatever it is that you want to call it, right? For many, they leverage their mission statement or their vision statement as part of their why, and that's the thing that they use to anchor in making decisions, in bringing on team members, making sure that people that they bring on or people that they connect with or partner with align with that. At the core, it's staying true to whatever your why is, whatever the mission of your organization is, and then making decisions from that. The other thing around, defining and having a clear vision for your business is understanding that the vision exercise can also help you identify a board of advisors who can help you grow. And so this is really where that focus around your network, right? Not all organizations need to necessarily have a formal board of directors, but I do think that, as leaders, we should have individuals who have gone before us and who have been successful that are in our corner that we could rely on to get advice from, as well as peers. Thinking through how do you leverage those individual relationships, whether it be people who are further than you, people who are at your same level. How do you leverage those relationships for new opportunities, be it investment opportunities or funding or other opportunities to gain exposure for your organization? Second is creating a schedule for business planning and strategy. And so I know that it is so easy, trust me, to have this on the back burner, especially when you're servicing clients, when you're doing business development, when you're trying to get out of the weeds of the day to day. But every business coach that I have had who is and has been successful for quite some time will tell you that they create time and space in their business to think, to plan, to strategize. And so that is them taking, whether it's, a week off a quarter, a week off a month, whatever that schedule is, but they take time away where they are, not surrounded by distractions, not answering emails, not trying to figure out what needs to get done on social media, but they take that time to set their quarterly and their annual goals, and then they'll allocate specific times to go over the KPIs for their organization, so key performance indicators. So what did they set out to do at the beginning of the quarter, at the beginning of the month, and what were the results, and then identifying where they didn't hit the mark, what needs to be done for them to hit the mark, and then where they did hit the mark, what do they need to do more of to continue that path of success? And that's obviously the same process that I follow. And that's a perfect place or a perfect time to assess areas where, perhaps you're not meeting the mark, that you're able to assess, okay, is it a process issue? Is it a staffing issue? At the end of the day, it's so critical and important to not just kind of like ride on whatever is happening, but to create that space to do that analysis. And, where things are going well, figure out, how do I add more gasoline to this? And where things aren't going well, rather than, chuck it all together, figure out what tweaks or what changes, small changes can we make to improve these results. And of course, while you're thinking about long-term success, it's really the day-to-day. It's really the short-term goals that are going to get you there. So those weekly goals, those monthly goals, those quarterly goals, really creating that space or a process to be able to track them and assess them. Number 3, and probably hardest lesson to learn, is really learning to say no, and saying no in a variety of different ways. For many of us, myself included, as I mentioned, this has been a hard lesson to learn, especially when you're coming from a solopreneur mindset, or if you were an employee before starting your business, especially if you were an employee, right? Like, we're trying to fill the day. And so every opportunity seems like an opportunity. When we're first starting out and we really haven't anchored ourselves in the market, it can be easy to get caught up in that, sure, I'll do this, sure, I'll do that, sure, I'll do that. But really thinking through, what is the ROI on this activity? What is the ROI on my time spent? At the end of the day, as the CEO in the organization and as the key leader, your time and your energy are the most valuable resource, always, and especially as a leader with a long-term vision. And so you need to protect, your energy, you need to protect your time, you need to protect your emotions at whatever cost necessary. So the invitation here is to really evaluate every opportunity that comes your way by asking if it will truly help you achieve your business vision, generate income, or add to your why. And if the answer is no to any one of these, this is where you learn how to set boundaries. This is how you learn how to, turn those opportunities down graciously, of course, making sure that you create that space and that opportunity to reconnect later. I can do an episode down the road around setting boundaries and saying no, not having to explain, from an empowering place that still allows you to maintain healthy and positive relationships within your network. Number 4 is really understanding when to hire. So one key component to scaling your business is knowing when you need to hire, who you need to hire, and deciding how you're going to hire them. And this could look like, deciding how to identify the right people for the right roles, building out a job description that accurately depicts what that person needs to do, knowing how to retain great talent, right? So once you get them in the door, even if they are 1099s or consultants, they have options. So why you? Why your organization? Deciding between hybrid, in office, remote work. I know a lot of organizations, big and small, are really challenged on what's the best mix for their organization. So that's something that you need to think through, especially now in the new normal that we live in, where the expectation is no longer everyone goes into the office, but you want to create that flexibility, and you want to keep yourself in a space where you are open to the top talent. And again, we can do an episode on hiring your first hire, or determining how to build out your team in a later podcast. And then within that is really developing your company culture, because once it stops being you and once you start actually having employees, right, you as the leader are the one who is actually determining or building the foundation of what that culture is going to look like. And every person that you bring into the organization adds a piece to that. So think of it like a puzzle, your culture, the culture of your organization being a puzzle, and every individual is adding a piece to that. So you have to really decide early on, what do you want? What do you want the culture of the organization to be? A few weeks back, I had Gretchen Salyer on, And, she talked about how her organization, the culture is going to match the mission, where it's about empowering parents or those who are responsible for childcare to do the best work, like the biggest work. And so that the work that they do is meant to be reflected in the culture of the organization. It was a great vision, especially having only, I think she said, about 5 team members to start thinking about this is what the culture is going to be, the culture of the organization to reflect the mission of the organization. And then as the organization grows with new people, maintain that. And then the fifth and the final step around, setting your business up for long-term success is really around capital. We all know that the lifeline of business is, your cash flow. It's funding, it's capital, it's all of those pieces. And while I applaud those who are able to go down the path of bootstrapping and, just figuring it out, I do think that there's an opportunity for us to tap into resources that unfortunately haven't always been as readily available to us, but are becoming more and more. And so, of course, I would say proceed with caution on this, especially if you're going to partner with investors. Definitely do your due diligence here. But I do think that there are resources that are available to us specifically in this day and age as women, as minorities, as business owners to be able to tap into and access the resources that we need to keep our businesses alive and sustainable and to be able to support other families through employment. So just to recap real quick on the 5 key steps you need to set your business up for success and long-term growth, define and have a clear vision for your business, anchor yourself in that why, keep it at the forefront of your mind and ensure that you are making decisions that align with that particular why or North Star. Create a schedule for business planning and strategy. Create time and space in your schedule, whatever that looks like, whatever the frequency, to just think, to plan, to assess, to realign, to do what it is that you need to do and make the tweaks that you need to make to continue to grow. Learn to say no. Our time is valuable. Our resources are valuable. We are valuable. And so really ensuring that you're evaluating, every opportunity, not just against the why or your North Star, but evaluating it against the ROI on your time for both you and your team. Recognizing when it's time to hire and really taking time to be thoughtful and mindful about that whole process because, at the end of the day, whoever you bring onto your organization, whether it's temporary, contract, full-time employee, they are shaping the culture of your organization in some shape or another. So, ensuring that you've clearly defined who it is that you need on your team, what skill sets do they need, what mindset, what attitude, what experiences, and as well as, how are they going to contribute to the overall culture of the organization. And then, doing your due diligence and doing the research and identifying opportunities and ways to infuse your organization with capital so that you're never in a place where, you're at risk of not being able to serve those whom you've been called to serve, as well as at being at risk of not being able to support those who are supporting you in the business. And so with that, you'll find that, the key to long-term success doesn't necessarily look all that different from what you need to do to grow your business right now, right? It's more so about being mindful and being conscious and being intentional. And obviously, when we have our eye on the future, we're able to make better decisions today that don't derail us from that vision, that we have in our heads. We'll make better hires because, again, we have that North Star in mind where we're headed, who we need on the team. We'll work better with our partners or our clients and, expend a lot less energy chasing things that don't serve our ultimate goals. With that, I would highly recommend, sitting down, working through your long-term vision if you haven't already, as in what you see from the company in the next 10 to 15 years, so that you can start to see what decisions and investments you need to make now so that things actually come to fruition. And I know 10 to 15 years can sound like a lifetime, and it seems like a lot. And especially with, this ever-changing, ever-evolving environment that we're in, it's almost hard to say, hey, 10 to 15 years out, this is where I want to be. But at the very least, there should be something, there should be some North Star that allows you to look that far ahead. Now, will there be changes? Obviously. Will you have to make pivots? Yes, of course. But if you know that you want to grow into, being a Fortune 100 company in 15 years, like, you need to start thinking about, well, what would a Fortune 100 company CEO be thinking about, be doing now to set themselves up for that? So just, really allowing yourself that ability and that time and that space to imagine, to dream, to envision bigger, so that you can start taking bigger action today, so that you can start resourcing and setting yourself up for success in the long term. That is all I have for this week's episode. Hopefully you found some nuggets in there that were helpful to you, and some of the examples, brought to life the tips and the steps that I've been sharing. I'd love to hear, how this long-term focus helps you prioritize your work and what changes you're making in your day-to-day operations. So I would invite you to send me a DM on Instagram or on LinkedIn. Both handles are Sabine Gideon, all one word. Definitely want to hear about it. And then, of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show, leave a review, leave a rating. I really, really, really do appreciate it, as it allows more women in leadership, more CEOs to be able to see it and find us and listen in and get the tips that they need to continue to grow their businesses as well. So with that, I will be back next week with another episode. Until then, have a fabulous week, and I will talk with you soon. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. Be sure to join us next week for another transformative discussion to help you grow, develop, and embody the courageous leader you've always been. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get alerts when new episodes drop, and join us for our next Leaders Lounge meetup on Zoom. Details and dates for future sessions are included in the show notes below, so take a look there or head over to sabinegideon.com/lounge to register and hold your spot for the next session. Again, that's sabinegideon.com/lounge to grab your spot. Excited to connect with you all inside the lounge. Talk to you soon.